The freshman to sophomore leap is often massive for college basketball players. So the question is, what sort of jump are we going to see from Zayden High this year?
You are Locked On Tar Heels, your daily podcast on the UNC Tar Heels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, it's Wednesday, July 24th, 2024. Welcome into the Locked On Tar Heels podcast, the only daily North Carolina show out there. I'm your host, Isaac Shade, joined by our good buddy, Coach Pat Kilby, coming at you from Oklahoma. You're joining us at the place to get your Tar Heels content every single day as part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks for making us your first listen or watch. We want to send a special shout out to all the everydayers and all the members of the Locked On Tar Heels Discord community where we're always having a great time. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Coming up on the show today, the summer roster preview series rolls on like it does every summer. We just finished last week wrapping up the freshmen. We went from James Brown to Ian Jackson to Drake Powell, and then now we move into the sophomores. I let Pack pick the order, and he said we're going to Zayden High, and so that's who we're talking about today. So Pack, give us that bio blast on Mr. Zayden High.
Yeah, so obviously we have Zayden, who is going to be a sophomore for the Tar Heels this year. Position is forward, height 6'9", weight 225, jersey number 1. Twitter at Zayden High, but the I in High is a 1, H1GH. And then Instagram is just his name, Zayden High. Let's run through the 23-24 stats real quick. Games played, 23, started 0, 4.4 minutes per game. 0.8 points per game, 18 total points on the season, 1.1 rebounds, 26 total on the season, 3 total assists, 9 total turnovers, 3 blocks, 5 steals. His plus-minus total was -9. His best was +15 against Charleston Southern and +6 versus Tennessee. Worst was -8 at Miami, -6 at Florida State. Field goal percentage, 31.6% from the field, 6 of 19 total. 3-point field goal percentage is 0%, 0 for 8. And from the free throw line, 66.7% at 6 for 9.
Okay, so Pack, obviously with Zayden, we're going to talk about numbers and stuff we saw. There's not a great big sample size, but there's enough there to go on as you extrapolate out. We'll talk some per 40 minute or per 100 possession numbers here in just a little bit. Pack, from a source about Zayden High, right? Like, so the listed height and weight, obviously from last year's roster, he was 225. From a source, they feel, quote, that he will have a big part, he being Zayden, big part of the roster this year, but will be at the 4 chiefly. He is up to about 235 pounds. And Pack, I know that 10 pounds doesn't seem like a ton, but when you're packing on muscle, that feels like a pretty big deal to me in order to be able to really do what you need to do in the ACC and at the big national level. Do you like hearing numbers like that for Zayden?
Absolutely, yeah. See, those numbers right there, you know, when you talk about putting muscle on and growing in your strength, that tells me a couple things. Number one, he's gotten stronger, but also he's gotten to the point where he's getting bigger and stronger and he's able to bang with those big guys, but he's not so big that he loses his mobility and he maintains his athleticism, which is obviously super important for the way that Carolina plays with their bigs, the way we like to run the floor and get up and down. So I love to see that. Yeah, he's putting on that muscle, but maintaining the mobility, which is great.
And I know that quote is that, you know, he will be chiefly at the 4. I don't think we ever see him slide down to the 3, but do you think we see some lineups with Zayden High where he's playing a small ball 5?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a possibility. And so much of it is up for question, right? Like, obviously, we know that there's a lot of optimism around Zayden High and his growth from freshman to sophomore year. There's a lot of what ifs or question marks around Ven-Allen Lubin and how he fits.
Yeah.
Is James Brown ready to play at all? And so it's just like there's a lot of question marks right now that haven't been answered with our front court yet. And so it's going to be really interesting to see. But I certainly think it's a possibility that we could see some Zayden High at the 5 for sure.
Yeah, I mean, the height is there. The dude is just a motor, dude. He's the Energizer Bunny. He just goes and goes and goes, and I love to see it with Zayden. All right, here's another question. You mentioned in his three-point shooting that Zayden was 0 of 8 last year. And, where it's like, oh, man, he didn't hit any. Let's also remember some other freshman Tar Heels that haven't exactly lit it up from beyond the arc. Kenny Williams made 1 3 his entire freshman season, and that was in the ACC tournament. Jalen Washington was 0 of 7, very comparable to Zayden High his freshman year, and then went 8 of 15 last year. Not a massive sample size, but he hit more last year than he took his freshman year. And so with Zayden, Pack, do you expect that we'll start to see some connection from outside? Do you think he'll start hitting some threes?
Yeah, I think it's a possibility. I don't know if we'll ever see him shoot them at like a higher clip. I don't anticipate him shooting 2 threes a game or anything of that nature. I just don't see that as his style. But obviously the only way to go from 0%
is up.
So I do think he will be more consistent when he does shoot them for sure. But I just don't know that we'll ever see him take volume threes or even 2 threes a game. Even he's so good in the mid range and like in his face up game that I just don't foresee him getting to that point in his game, nor do I foresee that we need him to do that.
That's a good point.
But I do think, obviously, I think he's going to be more consistent than what he showed his freshman year.
All right, Pack, here's another question, and this is probably the most interesting one of segment 1 here. You mentioned that Zayden played 4.4 minutes a game last year. He played a total of 103 minutes. Is his role on this team going to go up in 2024-25?
100%. Yeah, I think obviously with a lot of the questions in the front court that we just mentioned, the one thing that for sure rings true for Zayden is he's a fantastic teammate and he has a motor. He plays hard when he's out there, and that alone is going to get him an opportunity. And I do happen to think that he's going to take some advantage of that and buy himself a much larger role than what he had last year. And I think, it's just he's in a really good spot because there are a lot of questions. He's going to get opportunity. And like I said, with his heart and his determination, the way he crashes the boards and is not too big to play the cleanup guy, the trash guy around the rim.
Yeah.
There's
good money to be made in being a trash guy.
There is, man. And
literally and on the basketball court.
Yeah, he's going to be rewarded for that.
All right, Pack. Well, there we go. We want to talk more about Zayden's strengths and weaknesses. We got a little glimpse into that from some statistical data from last year. We're going to get into all of that and more in just a second. Right after I tell you about Game Time. Going to MLB games in the summer is hands down one of my favorite all-time things to do. The game, food, the people, everything that's part of the experience. I'm excited to make all new memories this summer at the ballpark. I even got to do that on July 4th with my family. And thankfully, if you're doing that, if you're getting tickets last minute, you don't have to sweat high-priced versions of that because Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, making tickets faster and easier to grab. In fact, prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer you get to first pitch. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. Here's some examples. Wednesday, July 24th, my beloved Braves have a day game against the Reds and Ellie De La Cruz at home. $5 you can get in the door to Truist. How great is that? Or maybe you want to see the Braves at the Mets in New York the next day on Thursday. The Mets are giving out pickleball paddles that day. Tickets as low as $9. If you're just wandering around Manhattan wondering what you want to do, Go to the Mets game. I know it's not in Manhattan, but you know what I mean. So anyway, take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Terms apply. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. Thanks so much for joining us on Locked On Tar Heels, your team every day. We're glad to be with you. Pat Kilby and I'm Isaac Shade. Pat, we're going to move next to talking about strengths with Zayden High. We started to see some of that last year. Obviously, we're going to continue to see more. You alluded to some of them earlier, but as you look at Zayden High in terms of his strengths, what is it that he's going to add to this Tar Heels team?
Yeah, so I really want to point to the scrimmage that kind of went viral there a few weeks back. One of the things that Zayden did in that was he caught one about 15 foot from the rim. He was able to just face up and knock it down. And see, I've noticed that as a part of his game dating back to his time as a high school player. And so to see him do that comfortably in the scrimmage, I'm really excited to see what that looks like this year, because although we haven't necessarily seen it yet live in Carolina uniform in games, I think it's a strength to his game, the 15-foot and in. I think he has a really good knack for rebounding. Like 70% of rebounding is straight heart. You know, you just got to have the want to read a ball, to track it, trace it, and go get it. You got to want it more than your opponent. And Zayden has that. And so he's got, you know, good 15-foot and in game. He rebounds the ball really well. He's really pretty stout defensively, actually. Maybe doesn't get enough credit in that area of his game, or is a little underrated there. So those things I think are his strengths and are staples for him that he can hang his hat on.
Pack, a couple that have stood out to me as I'm looking back on his numbers from last year is that Zayden, again, it's a small sample size, but he had 2.7 steals per 100 possessions, first among scholarship players. The only player on the team that had a higher rate of steals per 100 possessions was Creighton Lebo. And then right behind him comes Zayden. I think that long, we talked about the length last week with Drake Powell. It's a similar thing here, that he's going to be able to get in and poke the ball away some, which is really nice for a post player, right? We often think about guards being able to do that really well, but a big that can get his mitts on the ball is a really good thing. And another thing too, on this roster that doesn't have a Cormac Ryan or a Harrison Ingram, who we know are going to be these vocal leaders, it's nice to me to have somebody like Zayden High that I think is going to talk a lot. We saw last year he doesn't mind mixing it up when he needs to, either to defend himself or to defend the teammate. I think we're gonna see him step up even more with that this season.
Yeah, I totally agree. He's got a good personality for that.
Yeah.
The thing is that makes that special. Like, you can really be vocal when you're a great teammate, and your teammates will hear those things that you're telling them. But if you're not a good teammate and you're trying to tell people things, well, it's a lot harder for us to hear those things. So Zayden does a really good job of leading out as a teammate so that he can be vocal, so that fits him really well.
That moves well. Let's remind ourselves of the time last year. I can't even remember who it was doing an end of game on court interview, and Zayden just stood there and waited on him so he didn't have to come back down the tunnel to the locker room by himself. I wish I could remember who it was, but it's a story about Zayden. And so just those like small things that people don't catch or see, that's a big deal. And I love that point there, Pack, about him being a good teammate. All right. What about the flip side of this coin, right? What are the weaknesses or the areas of growth in your eyes for Zayden this season?
Yeah, so like we talked about, I think if he is going to make the three-point line a part of his game or try to stretch the floor a little bit, which is a possibility because that is the way that Hubert has, preferred to play in his first 3 years as head coach, is to have that four-man somewhat be able to stretch the floor. So obviously he needs to improve with that. And then, free throw percentage needs to improve, which 66%, not bad, but certainly could be better, was below the team average. So definitely needs to be better in that regard. And then to me, it's just about being consistent for him, and so he hasn't been that yet, but he hasn't had a huge opportunity to do that either. And so this year is going to be just a really, really big opportunity for him to prove that some of those weaknesses either aren't weaknesses or they're, could even potentially be strengths for him. We just haven't got a chance to see that yet.
That's right. A couple things. I want to dive back into the stats like I did in the strengths. Again, small sample size, so take it with a little bit of grain of salt. But two specific areas for Zayden that I'd like to see some growth in from that are turnovers. Zayden's turnover percentage last year was 27.9%, Pack. That's a lot. And to frame it up against the rest of the team, James Okonkwo was the only other player who was in the 20s, and he was at 20.9%. In terms of the other, there are 6 players returning to Carolina this year. The other 5 returners, their turnover percentage last year were 7.4, 11.9, 12.6, 16.4, and 19%. We know this is a team last year that as a team was incredible with turnover percentage. And so if this is an area where Zayden can take a leap, Pack, that's going to put him, even if he could get that down to 20%. I mean, you'd love to get it into the teens, but even just knocking off 8% down to 20 would be massive. And then the other area is in fouling. Zayden last year committed 12.5 fouls per 100 possessions. Nobody else on the team was in double digits. Nobody else on the team was above 9.3%. In fact, in terms of the other 5 returners, their fouls per 100 possessions, I don't know what a possession is, were 2.8, 3.9, 5.3, 6.5, 9.3. And then you get Cade Tyson coming in. His was 4.4 per 100 possessions. And Ven-Allen Lubin was 4.3 per 100 possessions. I forgot to mention them with the turnovers, but they both, Cade last year was at a 10% turnover percentage and Ven-Allen Lubin 9.9%. So those 2 transfers coming in are going to aid what Carolina is already doing in terms of a low turnover percentage and low fouls per game. But I'd like to see Zayden come down to join the rest of the team in both of those areas.
Yeah, totally agree. And, we talked last week about Drake Powell's floor, right? And so if we look at Zayden's floor, Coach Davis has got to know he can put him on the court and trust him to not turn the ball over. And so that's definitely something that I agree with. He needs to improve in that regard. And we got to be able to know he's going to take care of the ball.
And I think there's going to be, as we said earlier in the show, there's always this big, massive leap from freshman to sophomore year. And I think that's going to be one of those points of progression for him, is realizing, as you just said, if I want to be on the floor for those things, I've got to be more trustworthy. And so I think he's going to work on those well. Coming up here in just a second, I'm going to ask Coach Kilby to turn into Coach Hubert Davis and give us an end-of-season meeting with our guy, Zayden High. We'll find out the things to say, and we want to talk more specifically about Zayden's expected role this season. All that coming up in just a second. All right, Pack, when we're doing these returning players for our season preview series, I always force you to put your Hubert Davis mask on and turn into him and conduct an end of season meeting. So I'm asking you, Coach Hubert Davis, what would you tell Zayden High are 3 things specifically to work on ahead of the 24-25 season?
Well, I think it goes back to what we just talked about. Number one, got to be able to stretch the floor with the offensive style that we're playing. So not necessarily saying it has to be a 3-point shot, but got to be a consistent threat from 15 foot and beyond. And then, the other 2 things are free throw percentage. That needs to be consistent, especially as much as Zayden loves to bang around the rim and get rebounds and second chance opportunities. A lot of times that leads to fouls. So want the free throw percentage above 70%. And then, like you had mentioned, Isaac, I think it's going to be really important to take care of the basketball. When you can make for yourself a high floor, you can earn trust, which gets you on the court. And so if Zayden's able to do those 3 things and work on those and fix those, then I see no reason why he can't be a major contributor to what Carolina does in 24-25.
Man, love it. So let's talk about Zayden's expected role, place on the depth chart, those kind of conversations. Pack, we talked some about this earlier with, the front court in some ways is pretty wide open and it's there for the taking. Give me an expected role in terms of like minutes per game. It was 4.4 last year. What do you expect? And I know we're not doing a full on like minutes breakdown here, but just off the top of your head, if you had to say Zayden High will average X minutes a game, what would you say?
If you had asked me this a month ago or maybe a little more, I would have given you a totally different answer. So now I'll just tell you, I would probably project somewhere between 13 and 15 minutes per game. But previously I wouldn't have even cracked 10 minutes per game. But just with the questions around the front court and the growth that I feel like I'm seeing, plus my guy, Riley Davis, man, he's high on Zayden. Me and him have been talking, and he's kind of got me convinced to be high on him too. So I'm thinking that he's going to play a bigger part than what I originally imagined, which is great because that's a win for Carolina if these guys are getting better and earning more minutes. And so I'm going to say 13 to 15 minutes per game for him.
Okay. So both you and Riley Davis are high on High. You love to see it. That's a great bit of news. So Pac, there are 11 scholarship players on this team right now. Given that 13 to 15 minutes a game, where would you have Zayden in terms of place on the depth chart?
Oh man, that's really tough because I feel like there's just so much unknown with
That's right.
I do think that Ven-Allen Lubin is going to pan out really well. So I'm just kind of talking through this as you asked me, but Ven-Allen Lubin,
look, Riley literally just texted me. This is hilarious in real time. Obviously, he's not listening to the show. It's just like his ears were burning. Keep going. I'm sorry. That's too funny.
So I think Zayden is going to be, 9th or 10th on that depth chart, but that's nothing to really scoff at because I do feel like this is the year that we really break into the bench and play these guys a lot, especially in the front court, because there's a lot of things that have to be figured out. And I know that pretty much anyone that watches Carolina is sitting here screaming at their screen saying, Hubert doesn't play their bench players. But I do feel like this is that year. So even though I view Zayden as probably 9th or 10th at the worst, I think he's going to get some serious minutes for Carolina.
Yeah, and I mean, that would be a big change. I'm looking back at last year's minutes per game. 9th on the team was 8.3. 10th on the team was Zayden at 4.4. And so if that's going to be the case, and he is going to get 13 to 15 minutes, either he's got to be higher on the depth chart, or as you just said, Coach Davis is going to have to play the bench more.
And that's a real, it's a loaded question because in a lot of ways, the depth chart is rated based on like where I think he is as far as what, is he better than the 8 or 9 guys I have in front of him?
Yeah.
I don't know, but the front court is so not loaded. He's going to get opportunity.
Yeah.
The backcourt are the ones that are going to be fighting for the minutes.
That's right. That's exactly right, Pac. Because one of the questions we like to ask in this part about the returners is, who are the newcomers affecting playing time and who are the departures playing time? And I got to be frank, I don't think any of the newcomers affect playing time because unless Drake's playing some small ball 4, which he very well could do, neither he or Ian Jackson's going to affect Zayden's playing time. And I think James Brown, James is more of a 5, Zayden more of a 4, but I don't think James is going to see enough of the court, all due respect to him, this year to affect Zayden's playing time. So the bigger effect would be Ven-Allen Lubin in terms of newcomers, and maybe Cade Tyson if he's playing the 4. So I don't think any of the freshman newcomers affect it, but there is some battling there with the incoming transfers.
Yeah, and it's going to be really interesting to see how it pans out because obviously Coach Davis has a vision. We don't know what that is yet. But like you just mentioned, does Cade play some 4? Does Ven-Allen play the 4 with Jay Wash at the 5? And it throws a real wrinkle into things. So it could definitely stand in the way of Zayden's minutes to an extent, but it's not going to negatively affect it so much that he's at the minute total he was last year or less than that. I definitely think he's going to play more. So I don't know that you could argue that really anyone is affecting his minutes, because obviously we're expecting his minutes to grow.
Yeah. It's the kind of thing where he's affecting his minutes, right? Like the amount of growth he shows this year is really going to, and I mean, obviously you can say that about any player, but I think it rings really true here. Pack, let's kind of get to the point of wrapping up the show with some bold predictions about Zayden High. Do you have yours ready, or you want me to go first?
I can go. Yeah. So my bold, if it wasn't bold enough that I'm guessing, estimating him to play somewhere between like 12 and 15 minutes a game, I think that we're going to find Zayden High starting at least 3 games this year.
Ooh, I like that. At the 4 or the 5?
Ooh, let's say 3 of those games. So let's say he starts 3 games. I think 2 of them at the 4, 1 at the 5.
Okay, man.
I think there's going to be some experimenting that goes on early, and Zayden's opportunity.
Okay, I love it. Again, bold predictions are supposed to be a little bit out there, because here's mine. This is guaranteed to go wrong, but it's bold. If it ain't bold, I shouldn't be putting it out in the universe. Zayden High will lead the Tar Heels in rebounding in 2024-25. That's my bold prediction. Pack, how wackadoodle is it on a scale of 1 to 10?
It's up there. No, it's not that I can't see it happening. I don't know if he'll get enough minutes necessarily for that to happen, but he is a solid and talented rebounder, so it's definitely a possibility.
That's right. That's why it's bold, baby. I'm going out on a limb for our guy, Zayden High. That rhymed. Oh, my. All right, Pack, that's it. Great conversation today about Zayden. We continue on with the sophomores next week. We'll get to the point guard who's apparently deaf in one ear, Mr. Elliot Cadeau. We're going to be talking about him on next week's show, and that will be great. That show, instead of Wednesday, is going to be on Thursday. We're going to have an end of academic year wrap up Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, the top 10 most impactful moments in Carolina athletics from last season. And then Pack and I will be together on Thursday for the Elliot Cadeau show. So make sure you are in for that. If you haven't subscribed to the show on video and audio, make sure to do that. It's a great and easy way to make sure you don't miss a single second of the show. If you're not part of the Locked On Tar Heels Discord, we'd love to have you. Come for the Tar Heels, stay for the community. The link is in the show notes, and it's absolutely free to join. You'll love to see it. I said you love to see it. I'm trying to curtail that. I apologize to everyone out there. Oh, it's always a great day to be a Tar Heel. We'll talk again tomorrow, but until then, peace.